Hello and welcome back to this video on PyVis and Python. This is video 7 in our tutorial, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to add interactive buttons to your dynamic network graph in PyVis so that your users or you can interact with it and manipulate it in real time. And the way in which we do this in PyVis is very simple. All we have to do is simply type in g.showButtons and do that. And when we do this, what it is going to do is we're going to run the graph as well. It's going to add a whole bunch of buttons so that we can actually adjust our graph in real time. So if you notice, I still have the exact same graph. I can zoom out, I can zoom in. If I go down here though, you'll notice now I've got all of these buttons and everything from global. This is going to be the locale. So physics, manipulation. You can turn off the physics, interaction, layout. You can adjust the border width of everything. I mean, you can really adjust this network graph entirely. In the next few videos, I'm going to go through and talk about each one of these categories. So nodes, edges, layout, interaction, manipulation, physics, and global. And I'm going to show you kind of what each one of these do. For right now, though, I want to close this and start kind of working with the function that we have. So one of the things that you noticed about that graph is that it's probably got one very obvious problem. We've got a width set up here as 100%, which means that all of our options are being populated beneath the graph. This is very annoying, very difficult to work with if you are trying to use a lot of options. So how do we do this? Well, we've got a couple different options. Option one, we can simply change this to 75%. And when we run this, this is going to take a second, but you can already see what's happened. It's now put the graph 75% of the way, this is basic HTML, and populated everything else over here on the side. That's fine and dandy. But what if we want to have a network graph or a network map function that isn't always going to be used with all the buttons? What if sometimes we want to see a function have buttons and sometimes we don't? Well, we need to think outside the box. Well, not really outside the box. We just need to think Pythonically about how to solve this problem. So the way in which we're going to do this is we are going to create another argument for our function. We're going to make it a Boolean. We're going to set it up as default to be false. So when we go to map this data, if we don't have an argument for buttons, it's going to presume that it has no buttons. So now we're going to get rid of this entirely. Oop, close that back up. And now we can go down here and we can pass in an argument that is going to be buttons, and we want to make this true. So in other words, if we run this right now, nothing's going to happen because we haven't told the function what to do if it reads a false or a true for this argument. So what we need to do is we need to create a way to actually edit our network graph. So in order to do that, let me show you what happens when we print off the G object, our network graph. This is going to be important. And I'm printing it off up here. Well, you know what? I might as well print it off down here so you can kind of see what's happening. Print it off down here first. You'll notice that it's a huge dictionary that contains all of our nodes, all of our edges, and some basic graph information. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to print it off up here so you can kind of see just what I want to deal with in this video. So when we print this off, we see that it's a dictionary and it has a couple pieces of valuable information. It's got nodes, it's got edges, it's got height, it's got width. I'm not going to get into too much of this right now, but I'm going to tell you right now, if you sit here and try to print off just the width, which is 100%, you're going to have an error because it's going to tell you that it is not subscriptable. So what do? Well, fortunately, and this is not in the documentation, fortunately, we have a way to kind of work with this information in PyVis, and we're going to do g.width. And I'm going to get into why this is this way in a later video when I talk about how we're going to interact and manipulate the nodes after we've added them to the object. For right now, just understand that this is how you're going to do this. Now when we print off g.width, we can see that we get that actual data back of 100%. Now all we have to do is set this to equal 75%. Now, helps if you actually type in the percent correctly. Now when we print, it also helps if you get rid of that print there. Now when we print off g.width, we'll see that it should say 75%. And yes, it does. This means that we've now changed this 100% in the data to 75%. Why is that useful? Well, it means that now what we can do is we can simply say if buttons equals true, if buttons equals true, then g.width is equal to 75%. So now what we're going to do, we're going to delete that, we don't need that. We're going to say this, and I'm going to show you what's going to happen first when we have false here. So we're going to run it as false, even though we don't need to because it's the default. When we run it, we see that it is still 100%. I'm not going to bother letting that load. You can already tell that that's the case. Now we're going to run it with buttons equal to true. And now you can see that it is now going to be just 75%, which means all we have to do now is add in this if equation g.show_buttons. And now when we run it, you'll see all of these buttons now here on the side. So now we can start actually manipulating these pieces of information while looking at the actual graph. So we can change the node border width, the one selected. So if you select it, it's going to change the border width more. Again, I'm going to talk about all these in a later video. But most importantly, this is the one that's probably the most useful and the one you're going to use the most is physics. We can change the spring length, which is going to make the distance between nodes a lot larger. We can manipulate the gravity, which is going to affect how all this works. My point is that once you find the types of things you want your users to play with, you can actually narrow it down a lot more and allow them to interact with the data in dynamic ways by just simply changing a few parameters over here on the side instead of printing off a new graph each time. This is very useful for both you in your development phase and also for your users to create a very desired image of what they want to see. In a later video, I'm going to show you how you don't even have to rerun the graph. You can actually change the algorithms in these functions as well, or in these interactive buttons as well. But what I want to do now in these next few videos is go through and talk about each one of these selections, how we limit all of this, because we can filter this out. We don't have to display all show buttons. In the next video, we're going to limit it to just nodes and actually talk about what these node options do. But that's all for this video. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe. And keep on listening to this PyVis tutorial. It's going to be another 15 or 20 videos, but by the time you're done, you're going to have a good command of PyVis. So thank you for listening and have a good day.